There you go.
Good, that's a better voice than mine.
Mm.
Anyway, I will show you this. This is my palette. Barry knows this, but he can probably explain it to you better, Sandy, some other time. But basically, I made this thing out of foam core. And it's just pieces of foam core stuck on a piece of foam core to create these little divisions here. And it really is very helpful because what I do, I'll show you later, but I've got 2 monstrous racks of 300 pastel pencils.
Wow.
And then I've got probably a good 300 or 400 pastel sticks. And so we said, you can't have too many art supplies. I'm not so sure. Anyway, this particular painting, I did the whole thing with that Mungo set. And what you see in the center of this thing here, those are the colors that I used for this painting. So everything that's right there is what I use, and it's quite a few. And if you ever get into much pastel, you will find out there's no such thing as the right color. You always have to kind of mix and play with them, and one layer on top of another and that kind of thing in order to make the thing work. But I'm going to give Jane and Linda just 2 or 3 more minutes, and then we'll actually get started. And if they're not here, they'll have to catch up because we are recording. And we'll go back over here. And with this, this is done on pastel matte paper. And Barry cheated, and I gave him some. Because it's really good paper. You cannot get that locally. You'll have to order it. And what we can do, and because you don't necessarily want to devote your life to this, I get it in packages of 5 sheets. They come out of England, and
Oh, wow.
there's Jane. There's Jane, and they come in larger sheets. The sheets that I get are, I think they're about 19.5 by 27.5, somewhere in that neighborhood. And with that, I cut them up, but I do some pastels that are that big. And I haven't done one yet, but I'm going to do one that's a full sheet, which is actually, it's 40 inches by 30 inches. And I've already got a couple of paintings that I want to do on that. Hello, Jane.
Hello, how are you?
Marvelous.
Good.
I don't know if you heard that. I think you did, Jane, that Linda might be running a little late.
Yes, I saw that email.
Yeah. She's doing something for her mother. I forgot. I guess she lost her internet. She's getting it back for her or something.
She said she lost her phone, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure how Linda can get her phone back, but without the phone company.
She might be able to go over there and just call it 16 times. Maybe Mom just can't find it.
Yeah, that could be.
Anyway, we were just talking about, this particular painting, and the Mungo pastels that I think I sent you a picture in that PDF. That's what Barry and Sandy both went ahead and bought a set. So they're sitting there with theirs now.
Okay,
So,
very good.
But the Hobby Lobby brand or other ones are fine too. It's just fleshing them out a little bit. The one I like about the Mungo is, those are really small sticks, really, compared to most other sets. But I like that size myself physically. And there's 64 of them, and they're pretty good with the softness. There are other brands, and I'm not going to go into this too much, but, you know, these are Terry Ludwig's here. And this set here, that's his basic landscape set. And that's
Okay.
$150 for that set.
Wow.
And these things are what are known as the real soft. In other words, there's 3 different grades of pastel pencil. There's the ones that most everybody uses, everything we ever see, the stuff you'll buy for the most part at Blix or everywhere else. They're called soft pastels, but they're truly medium soft. And there are hundreds of them in many brands. But, and then you have hard pastels, which are usually, they're referred to as NU pastels, new pastel. And they're in thinner sticks, but they're very hard, great for
Okay.
detail. But there are brands that are super soft. And Schmincke and Terry Ludwig are 2 of the most well-known brands, but those things are, I mean, they're almost too soft. I've got them, but they're almost more than you want to deal with. And this also, you can see the board I'm working on that we'll start this with. I've got some extra space over here. This is lined out as an 8x10. But when I did the other one, the one that I showed you, this was sitting beside me. And this is pretty much what I do all the time. These are the marks that I made in testing out ideas for that. So it's usually a good idea, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the same good paper you're going to be doing your pastel on, just so it's about the same color, and you can relax and kind of just make some squiggly things. And I got to stop using the word squiggle. It seems like I've been devoted to squiggling. I will let you see the process of this before we start. This is the way I do things a lot. This is a pretty good sized sheet of sketch paper, and 12x16, I think, in one of my sketchbooks. And I usually quarter them, and then I just do a little scribble. And I started this one, I told Barry about it because I've told him to do this. When you get a photograph that you like, and I did find this photo, and
okay.
I liked that, but I didn't like a lot of the compositional elements in it and some of the colors. It was much more autumny, this and that and so forth. But I kind of like this whole flower thing. So I went ahead and started doing a scribble sketch like this. And ordinarily I would do 4 of them in different compositions. Trees would be in different places. I come up with, I got this one done, and of course running behind this week, and I thought, okay, that's pretty damn good. I'm just going to go with it. So I didn't do anything more than that. And from that, I went ahead and did this sketch, line drawing 8x10 that I sent you to trace from or to draw from. But then I went ahead and did this, which is something I usually do with a painting because it's a value study. So I can get a feel for where the light's coming from. You know, what am I going to do? Where's the light, the shadows going to be in it, and a little bit more of the composition. So I can solve a few problems there while I won't screw things up when I get to the pastel. So that was done. And then, of course, the next thing was done was that. And depending on
Really
your
pretty.
manner, this is pretty intense in color. You know, maybe even cartoonish a little bit to some people, but
I like it.
in the middle of February, with snow on the ground out there, Jane. I don't care what you say about Florida. Anyway, so that's, you know, that was my acid trip for a Thursday or something like that. All right, let's get started. I showed you the, you know, this, Well, I've got my camera over on it. Why don't you just show that? Man, fool. And I got them organized over here. Trust me, they're not that organized ever. I just did that just a few minutes ago to show you that these are the greens. These are all, those are all the, I didn't even realize those are all the reds and browns that I used. You'd think most of this is green, but that's all I had. So, and yellows, and then the blues, and then a black and white. So that's everything that got used for this thing. So now we'll go ahead and go back over here. And there's sky in this, and that's usually the best place to start. And you can, what nice thing about pastels, unlike watercolors, is you can layer all you want, like you could oils or acrylics. And so I started out with this one with, you know, that's a pretty bright blue, but I've got another, you know, this is sort of a gray blue here. It's even got a little purplish to it. And then I've got, where'd it go? Yeah. That same blue there, but that's a bigger stick. So what I came up with is, in doing this, I take this one, which is a pretty powerful blue, and I put my glasses on so I can actually see the sky. So I don't do the green grass blue. And I get in here, but here is, the idea is not to go marching in with a lot of pressure, Barry. Just, you're not trying to cover everything. You just want to get some color on it, because this stuff moves around good. You're not caring if you get a little bit on the trees, because you're going to layer a lot more layers onto it. You get some thrown in there, maybe, and if you miss a few places where it may go into the background and so forth, we can do it later. So you're not going to worry about it. So I get some of that in, and then I go ahead with that lighter one that I showed you here, like this, and I kind of go back over it and roll your pastel sticks around to find it, because each surface is going to be slightly different. And I'm doing this to kill some of the brightness of that blue. And then you got many options. Best one I know of is your finger. And you can just lightly, again, you don't want to lose your fingerprints. Barry has a story about that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You want to be very careful when you're doing this on sanded paper, because you can lose your fingerprint. Now I'm taking a paper towel and folding it up some, so I can just go there and be a little bit more aggressive and smear things around. Now I don't usually like to be too aggressive with this kind of blending, because it kind of kills a lot of color in the process. But I think in the sky, it's okay. Now, I'm not sure, I think on your screen, things seem to be coming out quite a bit stronger than they are in my reality here. So I'm going to try to tone things down just a bit in here. And then at some point, you think that that's kind of okay, but then you go ahead, and this is just pure white here. Then you go up in here, and here's one where you do want, you know, it's all your clouds, so don't worry about what's right and wrong. But when you do this, you know, you don't want to blend too much here. You want to give these clouds a chance to be there. And then you can take something that is maybe a little purplish. I'm going to use this, which is sort of a heavy purple like that. And boy, this is a light touch. And I'm just going in there at the base of these clouds. Just a little bit like that. Now, finger-wise, I will blend those down in a little bit. Gives me sort of a cloud pattern. And if I want, because I may have lost a little bit of the brightness, I can go back in, press a little harder, and get some highlights in there for the cloud. Okay, now you could spend a lot of time in here just on clouds, but we're not going to get to. So now we can come down, that's kind of finished. But, you don't have to finish anything with a pastel this quickly. You can get something everywhere. And so what I'm going to do now is start in with some green. And there's a yellow green. It looks, boy, that looks bright yellow on your screen, but it sure isn't here. And I'm laying it on its side to get some just general green in everywhere, even though that looks pretty orange. Am I not correct that that looks kind of orange on your screen?
Looks yellowish.
Looks yellow.
Yeah, yellow orange there. All right. I guess my painting is going to have to look more like what the screen does rather than what I'm looking at. So I may have to make some dramatic adjustments here, because it looks yellow-green on my screen. Now I'm taking some green, very light green, and I'm layering it in as I go. I'm just putting it not over like painting a bathroom. I'm just getting some everywhere on all of those areas there. And I can go, now when I do that, the reason I use this palette like I do is I want to make sure I don't put them back in the box. I put them down beside me somewhere and try to separate them out as to what I've used, because there's nothing, you can get very confused with this if you don't. This way you kind of know what colors you used before. I'm going to get this other tree sort of in there some, and then some of the same green over that. And most of these things that you see that I'm doing are big sort of flatter marks right now. They're not very tiny. Okay, so I get this in now. I'm not really sure what that tree is doing, these two trees in here, until I make some marks. So I'm going to go ahead, and I'm not going to try to be very dark with them or anything. I just want to have something to show me where these trunks are, because my pencil lines are disappearing. And that way, even though I know I'm going to probably obliterate them pretty much by the time I get done with adding more greens and things, at least I've got them in there now enough so I can go back at it with my nose is arguing with me again. And I'll go ahead and do these other trees, just getting some branch elements in there and trunks, just so I know where those doggone things are. And then I can get more aggressive about the actual coloring of these trees with various greens. Now, the light in this picture is coming from the upper right. So with that idea in mind, I'm going to start with some kind of fairly intense greens here. But now I'm getting much more delicate. I'm using just a little bit of the stick, some of the corners of it. I'm not trying to, and I'm keeping a shape, a stroke. You don't have to, but I kind of like these little semicircle strokes to start giving it a sense of where the light's coming from, and the light's coming from above. So needless to say, the underside of these branches or these leaf patterns are going to be darker than the upper ones. And then I'm going to get back down here because there's greenery on the other side. It's not like a flat tree. So I've got to get in behind some of these trunks with some darker greens back in there to make it look more realistic. When I come over here, I'm going to stay away from the right-hand side of this tree and make littler marks over here, sort of the corner of the stick, to get the same kind of feel. And we're just getting started, so don't, got a long way to go. Like that. And it does kind of give the sense of where it's coming from. And I can go over with this one and do the same thing. Now this tree that I'm working on now is actually closer than any of the other two. So the marks could get a little bigger, but it's a smaller tree. So I'm not going to get too crazy with that. And I get maybe just a few lightnings over here so it doesn't look like there's a hole. And now it's up to you. There are many greens that you've got over there. And what I'm going to suggest is you just start picking up whatever greens you have, and not just the munga, whatever you've got from any kind of pastel set you've ever used, ever had, ever thought of. And right now I'm just putting greens in there. And I'll give you a discussion on green one of these days and the origins of it and emotional kind. I hate green, by the way. Anybody who's had to be around me for any length of time knows my attitude about green. Summers are just terrifying because green is everywhere. And you have to really work hard as a painter and we're going to have to do some of that today, to come up with ways of having greenery that isn't just green. Otherwise it gets very boring. Keep in mind as you go where the light is coming from. See, I'm getting some darknesses back in behind here, getting some on the bottom. I'm trying to keep that idea of where the sun is. I'm looking at these various monitors to see how many different colors are showing up. This is actually just plain out and out bright yellow. And I'm not going to do much of this right now, but I do want to put in a little bit of light coming in from this side of the picture to help us to see where the light is. Okay. Now throw a little bit in some of these other places in there. And now before I go into a lot of other color, I'm going to get a little bit more attentive to these trunks here. So this is a sort of like a yellow ochre that I'm going to work with now. And this is going to go on just the highlight side of the trunks. Just get a little bit And I can add more, and I will. In there. Then I'm going to take a darker brown, sort of like that, and go back in here. Now, this part of the trunk, these branches up high, they're going to be a lot in shadow, simply because their leaves are covering them quite a bit. And then as I come down, I'm going to go to the shadow side of the trunk so that it has that light and shadow to it. And then you can take a couple of, you know, whatever you might have as sort of a different kind of brown in there and work them around a little bit. Get over here to the other trees. And these are just sort of the basics, because without this, we don't really have a tree. Now I'm going to get a little more courageous. See, this is that's a pretty bright orange right in there. So I'm going to go back in here, and this is a light touch. And just stick, wow, boy, believe me, it's lighter over here. I'll have to be very careful as to what you're seeing. This is going to be, yeah, this is definitely going to be an acid trip before I get done. Now I'm going to get into some other colors now. Okay, this is that purple here. It's a pretty dark purple. And I'm using that to help get some three-dimensionality to this tree by going into some places here that will show shadows, John, into the back of the tree. And it allows some of that to get buried back in there. And then I can go into a few places up in here just to tone things down with some different colors. The whole idea here, we haven't used it already, is the fact that this is Impressionism. In other words, it's, you know, more like a, you know, the idea of a Monet, post-impressionist in the form of a Van Gogh, where you're using these marks to get the sort of the feeling that the colors give you, the feeling of the structure. You're not trying to define things so photographically. Nobody's going to judge you by the actual exact structure of each tree, as long as it looks like a tree, or at least it looks like a tree to you. And now I'm going to go back up into the branches and in this tree and add just a couple of where things peer through. Maybe even get one into there. And here too, just make a little mark here and there where branches have popped through. Okay, now I'm gonna get a little bit more courage. No, I have no idea what this will look like on your screen though. I'll be a little careful. Okay, this is a pink. Now the complement of green, of course, is red. We're not going to actually put red in there unless we wanted to make this an apple tree or cherry tree or something. But if I add a few pinkish marks in there, something from the red side of the color wheel, it tames down the green somewhat, kind of knocks it down a little bit. And it's not quite so in your face green. Now, this is only a 2-hour class. This actually, the original that I did for this class the other day, it took me exactly 2 hours, right down to practically the minute. So I'm going to keep moving pretty quick, but the beautiful thing about this is dry medium and so forth, you're going to be able to go back into this thing over the next few days or whenever you want. And keep working on this until you get it the way you want it. So I would suggest that right now, rather than getting too worried about the perfection of your trees, get the basics in there so we can keep moving. And I'm going to go back here now. And this is sort of a mountain that is in the background behind this tree. And I'm using purple to create some distance in there, making it go into the distance somewhat and break up the coloring. But rather than just be straight purple, I'm going to get in there. And this is sort of a blue-green, deep blue-green. And I'm using that right on top of, but I'm not going over everything, just a few marks over that purple to push it into the background a little bit more. And boy, it's got pretty bright on your screen. I think I'll put some more purple on top of that because your screen shows some pretty intense colors. Or not your screen, but my screen and all screens. Well, it's there. I think I'm gonna experiment with just a little bit of there's a light touch of a I don't mind it here, but what shows up on that monitor isn't good. So I'm gonna change again a little bit here. This is a little bit more of a green to go over that, just to get that mountain, maybe that hillside, to look like it belongs in this picture. And nothing wrong with just a little finger thing there. The other tools you could use, I don't know if you've seen these or not, some people have them, these things with the handles on them. I think they come in sets of 4 or 5, and they have all kinds of different little foam tops on them that you can put on or take off and everything. And they're triangular, square. There's a couple of round ones, I think. And these actually do work pretty good. You just want to make sure you don't end up using them too much where they become a crutch. And the next thing you know, all your paintings look like, cataract surgery. So I got that in there. So now I'm going to move forward with this hillside here, but I'm going to start out, and this is wow, these colors are pretty powerful on this monitor. This is a yellow ochre, and I'm just using a light touch and just getting something on there like that. But I'm not trying to get too aggressive with it, especially since it looks very bright on that screen. Now I'm going to come back over it again. I'm using the flat side of the stick, And I'm putting some green on there, which isn't showing up as green on yours. So I won't use that. I'll try to use something that shows up more as a green. Now it's a little more green. We can do some of this. That's green, very light green. I don't want things to get too dark yet in there. And then I'm going to tone all of that down a little bit with what's that going to look like on your monitor? Oh, that's too much. Just running my finger over it now a little bit just to blend it, not too much, but some. And I gotta find something that works on your the monitors better. All right. I don't want this to get autumnal. So I'm going to have to keep struggling for some greens that look right on. Whoa. All right, let me tone that down a little bit. All right, maybe it'll make more sense here in a second. Brown versus this brown. I think I'll go with this one first. This little ridge here that I dreamed up along here, I'm taking this brown. You can see it's sort of it's got a warmth brown. It's like a little bit like a burnt sienna. And I'm going right along there. It gets much smaller as it goes back. Putting something like this in before I start worrying too much about all the other tree things will help me define a few things.
What'd you put down there, John? Like a burnt sienna?
Yeah, it's like a burnt sienna on there. Maybe because right now I'm going to go back over it and I'm going to start. I don't want to necessarily, I'm going to draw a line back here at the upper ridge, but I hope you notice that none of my lines are very careful. That's not because I couldn't if I wanted to, although there is some argument about that. But you don't want things to get so rigidly defined. So I'm putting a line across the top with this dark brown, and then I'm going to go along the bottom here with the same thing. But then in the middle, I'm just going to use some, and please play with the stick you have to find different surfaces, because as you use these, you'll find that each corner, each edge is going to be slightly different, and they make a little different mark, and some are good and some aren't. So now I got those in there. Now I'm going to use very dark brown. And I just have to find it. It might have been my darkest brown, so I'm going to go caution to the wind, Johnny. This is black. This is absolute black, but boy, go careful. You can see pretty powerful stuff. Now this is going off in the distance, so I'm wanting these black marks to get much lighter, much more delicate as I go back. It helps me with a sense of distance. And here, just gonna get a few right down here in the foreground, like that. And, you know, get a lot of contrast going on there. Now, the edge of this water, this sort of, it's not a hillside, it's this bank here, where there's been this erosion causing this lip like that. It's going to get a shadow on the top side of it. So I'm going to go along this edge here with sort of a loose, random green edge along there. And I can't specify or, you know, mention enough that as it goes back, the colors will get a little bit lighter and a little bit smaller. The marks will get smaller. But your idea is you want to get some of them right in there, kind of dark, right at where it hits the brown and the black. So it gives that idea of an edge going back. And then you can use a combination, or maybe just some of it being your finger, or you can use paper towels, tissues. There's a lot of foam. I sometimes use those little makeup brushes, little styrofoam makeup brushes that you get in a box of 10 or something like that. I usually keep some of those around.
What'd you use for that, John? Like a dark green?
Yeah, that's it's this kind of a green.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Got it.
Yeah. And I'm going to use that now. Might wait until the end, but I'm going to go ahead and put it in now just to help maybe define a few things. The shadows on this tree. Now you want to go a little bit easy. You don't want to press too hard with any of this. And as you get out of ways here, you can smear it a little bit together, and you can always come back to this. And you can get some shadow put in for the tree, knowing that the shadow is near the tree, near the base of it, as is true with any shadow, is going to be darker than that which is off in the distance. Now this tree out here is going to have the same thing, but it is further away or farther, depending on your attitude toward grammar. And so the lights is going to get a little bit of a different look to it, and we weren't even touching this forward tree yet. So I got all that in there, and I'm not going to think too much about the water and the rock and everything that's there just yet. I'm going to skip over all of that and try to get some background going to what we've got going on over here. And to that end, you're going to be using the same greens you had. See what kind of a green that makes for you. Well, it's not too bad. It's just a little bright. Go right up out of the paper and just get some color back in there. I found that this particular area was in many ways the most difficult because there's nothing really easily defined. And so therefore, you have to really be quite creative when it comes to the marks you're going to make. Also, never forgetting that light's coming this way. It's coming from the upper right. So not only with the forward trees and such, but with these marks back here, you kind of want to, now they're farther, this thing is a long way off. So you're not really going to see anything that's two individual branches or individual tree bushes or anything. So you're just going to put a whole bunch of stuff back there. And again, you can go back into this many a time and add a lot to it. I'm going to grab a little bit of yellow, just a touch here, not much. Not too much, but just a little mark here and there on that upper edge, just to show that there could be some light coming from the right, upper right. Now I'm gonna go ahead and rough in some of these great big tree trunks in here, but I'm starting out with kind of a lighter brush, a lighter stroke here with these sort of lighter browns. And then I'll go back at it with a darker brown. And here. You can get as aggressive with that as you choose. But as soon as I do that, I get a hold of the dark green, the same green I used on the edge of the dirt mound here, the dirt edge there. I'm going to go back into it there, and because they look too simple and defined back there, and then I can get some of these up in here, just a little bit here and there. Don't want to get too much near my front tree here, because I know I'm going to be wanting to be able to separate it from the background, which we're going to do just in a bit. And to do that, I'm going to take this sort of a, again, I call it yellow ochre. It sort of comes out a little more oranges for you, but see what you got. That's not too far off. And I'm going to try to separate on here a little bit of some other tree-like marks here to make this look like a little separate tree back in here. And then as I do that, I'm going to actually grab a little bit of the bright orange and just put, because that's going to make it look different than anything else back there. And that's not going to be a bad thing. But if it gets to be too much, and that might be, then I can kill it down with a different green, kind of bring it back in a little bit, and throw in a couple of extra tree trunk looking things in there. Now I will separate this little tree that we got going here by getting in there with some deep greens on its outer edge here. And that will kind of help separate it from that background that we just created. And I can get quite courageous with that by getting some, well, let's see, I want to get a few little purple marks in here against those dark greens. And if you put them right on those, some of those dark greens, it won't look as purple as much as it'll look this dark. And you're not getting quite the detail I am, but it's still not bad. Now I'm going to use this bright orange that you saw me use on the trunks of the trees. And I'm going to go back in here, and I'm going to make this little distant hillside initially like that, but you can kill it down with another kind of a brown in there. Well, it's not showing up too much for you, so I will change it. Well, it's still not showing up much for you. Okay, that's pretty bright, folks. Then let's change it entirely here. I better get to the other side of the color wheel for it. So I'm going to take some, you got to separate it from our forward tree. So I'm going to throw some blue on it in there. and try to get it a little separated. And then I can use the here on the trunk to make sure it doesn't get lost back there. And once again, since we're 50 minutes in and I'm keeping an eye on stuff, I'm wanting to make sure that we get something everywhere and we get it reasonably defined, so you get a feel for things as you go, and then you can jazz it up to whatever level you want on your own later. And you can send me pictures of your work and make me feel bad about mine. All right, I'm going to try to get a little bit more into the background here and then go forward. And then to do that, I'm going to take these same green, but it's just not as far, not a strong a mark. It's not making strong a mark back there. Then I will take the dark brown that I've got here and go back in there and make some tree marks. So it looks like there's a tree back in there. And then when I get down near the base of that, I'm gonna get some darker marks just to kind of define the distance of it. Now, this is gonna look wild as heck, I'm afraid. In the original here, this area in here is not really the center of the picture, but it draws you into it. I left it quite yellow, quite bright, because it does force you to look back into the picture quite a bit. And then you can wander around everything else. But the key to it is that it needs to have something to separate all the things out. So I used just straight bright yellow. Right down that line there, and then back along that line. You can't get much more yellow than that. And then I went back on top of that yellow with some of the sort of helping to blend it with some of this sort of yellow ochre look, just to give it a little start of not being quite such a stark, wild color. And then with a light brown, kind of work over that, because what you're doing with, and that's what Impressionism is sort of all about, you're trying to show more color than you are the actual construction of something, whether it be a church or a tree or whatever. It's the color that kind of drives the force of your eye into things, but you do have to, have some sense of control usually, and not letting it get too far out of hand. Now here is a very light touch with just some green on there that I didn't use in the original, but I think it might be a good idea here. Not a lot of it. There you can see a little bit, I hope. A little bit, make some more. Well, kind of overdid that. And if you do, you can just go back in there with the yellow or something else and kind of kill it down again. But that breaks up a whole lot of color back in there. So it's all kind of interesting now. Now I'm going to take a pretty bright green and can't get much more than that. And I'm going to come right into the edge of that. Like that. I'm coming all the way down here. Now I don't care what happens. There. Get crazy. And now I'm going to get a little bit more of a darker green. And I'm going to start out with making marks with the flat side. Just not a whole lot, but some, because I'm going to get back in here and do something more realistic here in a minute. And then as I get down into this darker area down here, I'm going to be a little more brutal with it. And you can see, you can hear it probably. I'm not messing around with these. You know, take a lot of your aggression out right in here. Now I'm going to take that same green and I'm going to use an edge or a corner, more just an edge, to get a little bit more delicate. Not much, but a little bit. And I hope that you're seeing with all of this that the composition, whether you drew it or traced it or however you got it on there, that didn't take a lot of effort, and you went past that in a hurry. You know, you're on to other stuff, and so it's all about color. It's all about the creation of marks that the eye goes, oh, like that. This is a darker green. I'm getting in there. I'm going to get over into this part here, making the eye gets bored very quickly. You can't let that happen. It looks like I don't have a clue as to what I'm doing. And well, I guess a lot of you have been around long enough to know there's probably some truth to that, but it does work out. So I'm going to kind of leave it like this and go over to the water. But before I do, anybody got courage enough to show me what you're up to? How about you, Sandy?
What time is it?
Oh, okay. No, you definitely got trees.
You want to go somewhere?
Let me see again. Yeah. Hold it just a second. Yeah, you're.
Just bring her back here in her
I can't
stroller.
tell. That's good, Sandy.
Yeah.
I can't
If it's
tell
necessary.
whether or not it's and whether your colors are as bright as what you're seeing mine are or not. I could see yours, but you know, it depends on lighting and your monitor, your camera, everything else. So it's very difficult, but I would suggest maybe getting some even stronger, brighter colors in there. How about you, Barry?
Let me see. I mean, we got here. See if I can get a light on everything. I don't know if you can see that or not. Is that light? How's that?
No, I can see now. Yeah. Now you've got yours looks like it's more sunrise because you got more yellows right across the tips of everything on the trees.
I do.
And I like
I'm gonna
it.
have to change that, I think, maybe.
Well, a little bit, but no, I like it. Obviously you haven't gotten to where you're going to get with
Right.
the over on the tree trunks over on the left-hand side. You still got a lot of
Right.
white area over there, but that's good.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I can see. Well, under different lighting, it shows different.
Yeah.
How about you, Jane? You got anything going? Except I know you muted yourself.
There we go. I was
Yeah.
talking to my daughter, so. Now remember, I'm using oil pastels.
Yeah, I'm glad you are because I wanted, can you show me a little closer? Yeah. Yeah,
Which way to
very
make it
good.
go?
I think, that's oil pastels are great. They're different. What kind of surfaces are you working on?
I'm using that same one I did last week. It's called it's Canson's multimedia, but they're boards. So they're a little bit more support. See, they're like cardboard almost. So that's what I'm
Yeah,
using.
yeah.
Now, I actually do like that stuff and it works good, especially for oil pastels. It works good for oil pastels.
Yeah, I looked it up to see if it would work and it said it should work. So, because I didn't have a Bristol board here, but Bristol board probably didn't have enough tooth anyway.
I like Bristol board with colored pencils, but it doesn't have anywhere near the tooth. That's true.
Yeah. It's hard. I think it's harder to do those with the oil pastels because you can't blend to cover your white spaces. You have to actually color the white spaces because they're not blending very much. You just have to put color in every spot. So I think
Yeah,
the
I
soft
don't disagree with you. I do think that, see, I had to play with my camera a little bit here or there. That should get us where we want to be, I hope, I think. Yeah.
So I
Sure.
might buy those soft pastels when I get out of this house and try this again with them.
I understand. Well, I think I'd like to do some oil pastels or at least some colored pencil. Do you have any colored pencils down there, Jane?
Yes, I do.
Well, I bought more. Sandy was saying earlier that you can't have too many art supplies.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes I'm not sure about myself. I spent about $150 on colored pencils a couple months ago or so, and they're beautiful. They're wonderful, and I did a little bit with them. The thing I find with those is, and including I have blenders, and what I want to do is show you an experiment because oil pastels will work the same way.
Okay.
Colored pencils can come in two forms. They're either wax based or oil based. And depending on which ones you have and so forth, most of them are wax based, but you can use solvents with them and you can do some pretty weird stuff with them. And then you can use colorless blenders, so you can get, and the thing is that the colors are so vibrant, so intense. You can do some neat things with them.
John, one of the classes I took at the Toll Bowl, it was an owl, and the lady had us put odorless terp or Gamsol. What is it? Gamsol or something?
Yeah, it's a terpenoid or Gamsol, either one. Yeah.
Yeah, had us put that in one of those water brushes, and then after we layered the colors on the owl's feathers, she had us go over them with that water brush filled with that odorless terp, and it blended it.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where you got to be kind of careful with it, or you'll end up with a pretty big smeary mess. But it does work well, and you can get a lot of blending, and you can get a different intensity of color than you can with soft pastels. All right, back to springtime. I'm going to go over here now to where the water is, and I'm taking this blue here, and that's quite an intense blue, but it's a very light touch, and I'm not pressing very much, but I'm just getting some blue everywhere, most all of which I'm going to cover up, but it's there. And it's pretty intense in your screen. Boy, it sure doesn't look like that over here. All right, so now we got a lot of reflections going on with this water scene. So before I get too far into them though, I'm gonna go ahead and put these rocks in the bottom left or right over here. And your rocks can be, make them your rocks, okay? I have a tendency to, when I do rocks, they're more kind of jaggedy, and I just seem to like them better than lake stone kind of look, but that's up to you. And I'm gonna use a lot of grays and blue grays. This is a straight gray, has a maybe a little color in it, but I'm just getting some fundamentals in there as to the shape of the general rock area without too much caring about highlight and shadow or anything like that at this point. Just something there.
What are you putting
And-
on those, like a gray, John?
Yeah, see, it's sort of like a kind of a little bit of purplish gray to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess you can see that down here. And then I'm gonna immediately go over that with this kind of a blue. I don't know, can you see that one? And I'm not putting on much, just some, just because gray is dull. And I'm just putting it on the upper surfaces a little bit here and there. Now I need to start defining things as to what the heck that stuff really is out there. So I'm going to take a pretty intense dark blue and I'm using that to be my initial side of the shadow. In there. I'm going to have to get a little bit more realistic for you because you're not going to be able to see too much. But I'm going to go right straight to black. I'm not worrying about the reflections yet. And I don't want to fill in these marks too much. But it is black. And I'm making a little bit of separations up there. And then as I go, when you get something that is really intense and really black, because you have to do it, then you can back off a little bit with some other color to knock the blackness out. So I'm going to go back to that gray I was using and use that to blend the gray, the black marks that I just put in there. So they're not quite as intense. And even down here, tame them down a little bit. And then they're getting dull. So I'm going to go back in with just, well, blue's not doing me much there. So I think I'm going to actually jazz up these particular rocks with some brown that has got a little orange to it and get a little bit more going there. Then I got to get back into it. All right, now this is a dark brown. I'm going to save it for a little bit more places later, but right now I'm going to use it as a flat mark to try to create some of these reflections from the rock on the water. That looks very dark to you, I'm sure. So I'm going to have to lighten it up because it doesn't look that dark on me. A little bit there. All right, now we got to get into this this reflection going on in all the water and everything, and tame down the blue. You can see that color there. It's sort of a burnt sienna, maybe a little bit duller than not quite as orange as a burnt sienna, but I'm just lightly putting it over areas to kind of get rid of some of the brightness of the blue, and I'm certainly putting it in quite intensely along the far shore there. That helps. And then down here, I know we're going to be adding some things here, so I'm putting in some of it in there. Now I'm going to go over to the one that I keep calling yellow ochre that isn't. Only I can't find it. Yeah. And I'm going to start putting in. The thing you always want to remember when you're doing this kind of thing with water is it's not any surprise to you that water has no color. So everything you're doing with water has to do with either what is being reflected from above or what's coming up from the bottom. Obviously, not much comes up from the bottom in big lakes and oceans, but when you're in streams and places like this, you have to kind of keep in mind what's been going on that might show up from the shore. So I'm adding these kind of bright marks here and there because they're going to be picking up all of that from the trees and the surrounding area. And since our trees have got a lot of green in them, I'm going to pick a green. And I'm going to be using, can you see it? That kind of a green there. And I'm just going to lay it down flat and pull some green marks in there. Just here and there, not always going the same direction. And start to get, wow, that sure looks intense. And this camera, I shuffle things around, and this is my new iPhone 13 that we're looking at this picture with. And it's a very good camera and makes things quite crisp, actually more crisp than they really are. And so my water doesn't look quite that stark. I think because of that, I'm going to take this paper towel, soften this. I'm just going to go over here and move things around a little bit. I don't like to do too much of this because it kind of kills the vibrance of things, but from what you're seeing over there with these monitors, that's just a bit more than anybody should have to see. That's a little better. But we've got some darker marks to go with too, because there's tree trunks floating around out there and a little bit of everything. So I'm going to get something darker where I want it darker. That's not it. This is it. You don't want to make too much of a mark, but you can get a few little hints of things here and there out there in the water itself. And then across, especially along that far bank, without being too defined, you can certainly get some sense of reflection out there. And you know, you got a tree there, so you can kind of go overboard, maybe in a couple of places there, as though it could be seen, that kind of thing. And then down here in this foreground, I'm using this to get me some verticals like that. I'm going to use the edge of it to get something that's not quite as squiggly. Oh, I did it again, squiggly. And now I'm going to use my darkest brown and get some dark marks in there. And those you don't have to get quite as intense as I have. I mean, what you're seeing of mine is, that one is not, this is the one I did the other day, and it is nowhere near as many marks, and the water is a little bit more understandable, although the water in this one I've softened quite a bit. So that may be to your liking or not. That's just up to the individual. Like they say, it's your painting. All right. Now, we're going to start playing with these. I'm going to start putting in these flowers. All right. Now, there is no rhyme or reason to this, and it's going to look like I'm, you know, really having an angry attack on these flowers, because I'm going to be using some pretty strong marks that I use kind of pushy. So anyway, like I say, they're your flowers. And I'm going to actually use about 3 or 4 colors on these. And right now I'm just banging away at them because I'm pushing and banging pretty hard, because I'm trying to make sure I cover up those other colors that are underneath it. Now, I'm not sure, I have a feeling that that's going to be actually a little easier for Jane with the, I don't know, you'll have to tell me, Jane, whether or not this kind of overlay like this is easier or worse with oil pastels. You can even hear that I am not being gentle with this. It may not look it, but there is a method to my madness here. So you have to think a little bit of patterning when you do this, where some of the flowers are kind of grouped, and then some of them are kind of walking around on their own. Some of them have gotten themselves way down into the corners. I'm going to turn the stick around here a little bit. Every once in a while, just maybe get a different mark.
Sorry, I didn't
And
realize I
again,
was muted, but yeah, they're going in pretty easy with the oil pastels.
yeah, I kind of had a feeling they might. You know, these, and it makes a difference as to the pastels you're using. I should get up and grab one of those Terry Ludwigs. I will in a minute. And those things would not, I mean, they just bury this thing, nothing, no time. They are soft. Now I can also tell you that if we wanted to, we could all get mildly high by, if we were using fixative right now, you could take take it outside in this freezing weather, and because we're not in Florida. Jane doesn't have to worry about that.
Yeah,
But, well, and we'll talk about fixative a little bit, but you could take it outside and spray it. And if you did, then these pastels that you're putting on now would go on much easier because it would hold the pastels that are there, create just a slight more tooth, and then you could pile stuff on that. Now I'm going to use a couple of different methods here. Now that I've got all of those little pink marks all over the place, I'm going to go back over, and this is just pure white, and it's almost like a bullet mark. Just believe it or not, I am trying to make these white marks on the side that's facing where the sun is coming from. Doesn't always work, but I'm trying. Say, don't ask me what kind of flowers. And these are just the basics. I'm gonna get back in here with some dark color in a minute, which is gonna somewhat obliterate a lot of what I'm doing and will make me go back over. But that's okay too. Because I'm helping myself right now figure out where everything is going to go. And for that, it is there. Now I'm going to take my darkest green and I'm going back in, down in here. Because I got more color I'm going to be putting into these flowers. But I don't want to make too big a mark back in there, but I am going to take some of these dark greens and get back up in there. And the marks have got to be as sort of loose and random as you can get. Now go from there right over, even though I've still got a lot of flower work to do. I'm going to get back in here with some, this is a dark brown, as you can see by that. It's a real dark brown, and I'm going to do this without saying the word squiggle more than 26 times. For some reason or other, this actually is the truth, I swear. I have gotten in my old age of painting to really like squiggling. I know that sounds weird, but even my sketches and everything, I seem to, whether I do it on purpose, I do it just sort of naturally. I don't like straight lines anymore. I'm sure that there's a therapist out there that would have an answer for this, but.
well, your paintings did kind of specialize in swirlies. That's probably where the swirlies come from.
Yeah, I think I've gone from swirly to squiggle. I'm going to get back to swirlies, though. If I ever get my act together well enough to paint for myself again, which I'm really hoping to, I have definitely got some swirlies on my mind. Now, the only thing here is, and everybody's listened to me talk about this forever, whenever you're drawing branches and tree-like or growth, remember, everything gets smaller as it grows up. So you don't want to end up with, big branches that are being held up by little tiny branches. So and then from a perspective standpoint, use a very light touch when you get out into some of the more distant ones or some of the things that are just kind of out at the very tips. And I'm just gonna, and you could go in here and spend, you know, another half hour just putting twiggle branches in there. But notice the direction they're following. It's pushing the viewer's eye back to the center of the picture, which is good. I am now going to go back in with this kind of a orangish light, and just here and there, I'm going to try to find some places where I can get sort of a highlight on a lot of these branches. You know,
Did you make the
light,
branch? What color did you make the branches?
they're really a dark brown. It's this brown here for me.
Okay,
It's kind of hard for you to see. It's about the darkest brown I have without going near black. So it still looks brown.
I don't think I even have a brown that dark, John.
Yeah, you do. It's just that what you're seeing is darker than what I'm seeing here in my
Oh,
hand. It's the monitors makes it look black practically.
Right.
Just look for the darkest brown in your set, and that's probably where you want to go.
okay.
I would stay away from black in these corners, but you could, I will just because I can. I'll go down in here and just in the bases, in the shadow parts down here, I'll actually put some black in just a few spots and sort of intensify that look. But I've still got a long way to go with those flowers to bring those out forward. Right now, my flowers look like they've been picked over by a bunch of blue jays.
Hmm.
So I'm going to get back in there with a little more intensity. Now this is a more intense pink than I was using before. It's more of a neon, and it'll pop things out even more. And that's not a bad thing. I can almost hear us all making flower now. Dick, 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 dick. Art class required a mute. And again, I have chosen pink flowers. You could have done these with yellow. I just think that because my theory behind this is there's not just so much from that original old photograph, but there's so much green in this that we've got to get away from it and give the eye a break. And the best thing to do that is to go to a complement. And in this case, the complement, of course, of green, and once again, is red. And by putting pink flowers in here, we're kind of giving a visual balance. And with all the green behind them, around them, so forth, it makes them stick out even more. So that's not a bad thing either. Now, I'm going to take red. This is a purple. I don't know if you can see that purple. That's a pretty neon-y purple down here that I just put down here in the corner. And I'm going to use that to try to pop these flowers out a little bit more by taking a clean, crisp corner of this, and then just going in here. And again, it might not look it, but I am trying to get to sort of the, I guess you'd say the, 7 or 8 o'clock position of a circle. In other words, the bottom left edge of any of these marks I've made for flowers to help give them a little bit of a three-dimensionality from the light. It's not anything that's very well thought out by me, believe me. And again, I could go back in here and play for quite a while, but we're at 7:30 and I'm going to move on to my last little treeness here. Now, when I did the original of this one drove me crazy. It was the very end and it still drove me nuts. But I'm going to give it a try. I took a right down in here and I buried a little branch like, and I squiggled my way up. And a little bit of this and a little bit there. Maybe one in there, one there. And this is where the trouble started. I could not really feel good about the flowers that I put on the ends of this. And I fumbled around with them so long the other day that I think I kind of figured out what I had to do today to fix that. The background of the water behind it is darker and more intense, so my little yellow buds here stick out more, and that's what was driving me nuts before. So with that, I'm going to add some sort of reddish red on the bottom sides of them. You might not even want to. You might want to leave them yellow. Kind of depends on you. And then I remember I put a little sort of as sharp a dot as I could in there. And it kind of gave it a center, sort of. Now, at this point with this thing, I mean, I can take, and this is something I also recommend. We do a lot of 8x10s. I do that for a reason. If I put this on there now, you can kind of see, you know, this is an 8x10 mat, double mat, and you can move it around, and, you know, that's basically what it would look like framed, which is not bad. But if you go to Hobby Lobby, and you can see I'm not really caring too much about, well, you know, what a mess I made. You can get one of these mats for, I think it's like $4 or something like that. And if you do find that you do a painting in class or on your own, that of any medium like this, pastels, watercolors, pen and ink, if you do it 8x10, you go over there and you get one of these things for about $4. And then they have a whole collection of 11 by 14, which is the outside measurements of this mat. And you can get an 11 by 14 frame with glass in it for about 10 bucks there or so, 10 or 15, maybe a little bit more if you want to spend a little bit more, but for about $20 to $25, you've framed your painting with a nice double mat. And it really looks nice. I think Barry's done a couple of things like that.
Mhm.
Jane has framed some of her stuff up in the past, I think. Haven't you, Jane?
Yeah, a couple things,
I'm just saying that it's you know, it sounds like I'm a salesman for poor Jackie. But she is there, and I do recommend, and it's anybody will tell you that they do too. You find out what, probably from me, what day she's going to be there, because there are some people there that try, but they're not really very personable, and they don't really have the framing skills that they should. But it does have, they do have good equipment, and you can get some good framing done. I just put some more highlights on those rocks because they were getting pretty dull on the top. Now with this is a time when you kind of evaluate everything and you go back into it with all the different things you can do and probably should do. And I'm going to do just that now and sort of blather my way through it as I go, which I'm terribly good at. For instance, it might not look it in on what you're seeing, but to me, my tree trunks look a little weak. So I'm gonna, especially this one, I'm gonna go back in here and get on the shadow side of it and get a little bit more intensity to it. This one seems to have lost some of its shadow on one side down here, like that. And what you're really doing now, I hope, is when you get to this point, and I'm probably a little ahead of everybody, I hope, when you get to the point where you've got everything filled in, you got your flowers in, all of that, then you want to step away from it and kind of come back and tap it with this, that, and the other thing as you go along. And it's a good time to also be just a little bit more courageous when it comes to color. Now I got a darker green that I can get some in, so I'm going to separate some of that. And if I can't get the darkness to pop things up quite the way I want, then that's a good sign that I need to get my lighter color that I can't find. Right here, right in front of me. No, it is. There it is. And I'm going to go back behind this tree a little bit. And so that'll help to bring the darker tree in the foreground up a little bit. And maybe even get a little bit of that up in there. I think this tree over here needs a little more contrast to it. I've also found in my old age, I like more contrast. I like things to get a little bit more dynamic, a little more dramatic. I'm becoming a drama queen in my old age. Things right in here seem to have gotten very lost. I can't quite figure out what I've done there. So I gotta define things a little bit more. Maybe bring this tree over just a touch more and separate it from the sky and background some. Because it got a little yellow and fuzzy in there for a while. I think I need to get a little blue back in there. That looks way too blue. Doesn't look like that over here, but what it sure does in the monitor. Yeah, it's not kill it. So I will go at it with one of these. And a little white right over top of it. And I've been painting the picture now. I'm painting the monitor. I'm just going by what I'm seeing over there. I'm gonna give it a little bit more definition along this ridge line here. How are we doing out there?
Hmm.
You're not swearing yet, Barry. That's a good sign.
No, I'm not. That's,
That's usually my, I guess you'd say, my yardstick is the weather and how well we're doing. Is whether Barry is starting to use foul language. So.
yeah, I can't seem to find a brown that's that dark as that. Well,
Well, I think it might be, if you're talking about these branches and such,
yeah,
I got down here, they look much darker on the monitor than they do here on the pastel paper itself.
okay.
So, and I don't think they should look quite as dark as the monitor is. Same thing is true with these over here, the ones that are on the waterfront over here. I don't really like this that much.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I'm going to be playing around with that a little bit more because it's got kind of out of hand. I want to add it a little too aggressively, so I'm adding some other colors to it down there to make it a little bit more realistic. And I think I may, even though I didn't in the original, because the originals, I just got carried away here. I'm going to even throw a little green into this to kind of take some of the intensity of all that black off. Yeah, I did a boo-boo. So I'm not going to argue with it. It's just there, but I wish it weren't. I wish this is okay, but it's too much. They're too big at this end down here. So it should have gotten smaller. When you now I as I said, when I did this, I guess Wednesday or Thursday when I guess it was Wednesday that I did this, yeah. I purposely said I was going to go with some pretty strong colors of yellows and greens because I wanted to get the spring-like look. Yeah, I didn't care anything about realism or anything having to do with what you might see in an Ohio countryside in the spring, unless you're getting some really good drugs. But I think that it's a good idea at times to push yourself over into an area where you lose a lot of the realism. You lose a certain amount of just the timidity that you get from trying to reproduce nature, and go ahead and get a little courage in there. Maybe I was struck by the Van Gogh exhibit that Barry and I went to a week or so ago, because the colors there, of course, are sometimes quite intense.
Did you go to the immersive Van Gogh or just the museum?
The museum.
Okay.
I the only way I would have gone to the immersive is if I was high as a kite. So I don't do that. I never really have had, that wouldn't have impressed me. But the one at the museum was extremely good. It's one of the best shows I've seen anywhere.
Yeah, fantastic.
And it was 17 Van Gogh's paintings there. And then if you didn't go, then it mean, the other, what would you say, Barry? There had to be 50 other paintings there.
Oh, easily.
At least.
Yeah.
That were by people that influenced Van Gogh, from Degas to Monet and Lautrec and dozens and dozens of others that he admired or he tried to emulate. And that really gave you a good understanding of his thought process. Plus, you got to see a lot of good paintings by other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did I ever tell you I went to the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam about 5 years ago?
I think didn't you buy a painting outside of there from a guy on the street?
Yeah, I bought a painting outside Notre Dame from a guy on the street.
That was because I know you had a picture. You brought it in to class once.
Kind of, but I liked it.
Well, I think that's really great when you go traveling like that. To find the street artists and so forth and buy something from them, from the local. It's a great souvenir. Plus, it helps them out, and this kind of has a great memory ability with it. But
every place I go, I buy a painting.
Yeah, that's sort of Jane. I pass that on to everybody that I know that travels, hoping hoping they'll take your lead.
Yeah. Don't need another magnet.
Yeah.
No, that's a great idea. I think another thing I'm going to add, ladies and gentlemen, is I just noticed right along the waterfront here that we got the shadow of the green on this embankment, but I'm going to put a few little sort of, these are again more of a yellow ochre, not a bright yellow, but I'm going to put a few marks right behind the green ones to kind of give it a feeling more, again, of that three-dimensionality of the embankment. What do we want to do next week? Jane sent me a couple of sunsets and a lighthouse. And a lighthouse would probably be good as a watercolor. And the sunset would definitely make a good pastel. But I thought maybe next week might be a good idea to shift gears a little bit and go in either into acrylics or oils and experiment a little bit with maybe a still life. Because we just did this is a landscape, and the last one we did was an architectural pen and ink landscape sort of thing. And then a beach scene before that. Anybody have an opinion? What materials do you have down there? Whoops, Jane disappeared.
No, I'm here. I'm looking at another picture to send you.
Oh.
I just sent you another one.
What kind of materials do you have, dear?
I have my watercolors and my oils, basically. And my daughter has colored pencils and oil pastels.
Okay. Looking for your picture.
I just thought my daughter got these roses yesterday and I just thought they were gorgeous.
Well, I'm going to, oh boy, they are.
The background's not too hot, but the flowers are pretty cool.
They certainly are. I'm not sure we could tackle that.
Yeah, that's okay.
The thing is, I have to think about what can we manage to stumble through in 2 hours too.
Right.
Although
right.
we've done a couple of them where they've been 2 classes, you know, a 2-class project. But what about you, Sandy? What materials are you floating around with over there? I know, Barry, you've got a little bit of everything.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind acrylics again, but it depends on what.
Andy, do you have any acrylics?
Yes, I have a few acrylics. I did a few acrylics just because they were easy to do from YouTube. You want me to show you what I did from my YouTube?
Absolutely.
Of course, now the YouTube class was about 20 or 30 minutes, but it probably took me 2 hours to do these.
Oh, that's good.
Oh,
And
That's
definitely,
wild.
you're back in Florida again.
Yeah, they're pretty much all seascapes, sir.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
What do those look like?
I like
With
that.
11 by 14, maybe?
I think there are 11 by 14.
Yeah, those are very
ooh,
nice.
I like that.
So that's why I was just playing around.
Well, what about Sandy? Can you hear me? Do you have acrylics? Can't hear you.
Yes, I do. I haven't used them for forever, but I do.
Well, that's true. Now I will. It's not going to surprise anyone to hear me say that I hate acrylics. Everybody knows that. But they have a value and a place and importance. And I don't have it on my computer right now, Jane, but I do have the picture on my phone. Maybe I can do this of your lighthouse.
Uh-huh.
And that would actually, that could be an acrylic.
Yeah, that probably would work.
Let me see if I can drag it up here.
I figured it could be an acrylic or a watercolor, either one.
Yeah. All right.
Rocks don't look right.
You want me to send it to you again, John, or could you find it?
Look right. Close.
Hang on, I just got a thing from Linda a little bit, about an hour ago. She's still stuck in Hebrew and struggling with Spectrum.
Oh, my.
Yeah, let's see, Jane, I don't know why they, where is the last one you sent me?
I can just resend the picture here.
Yeah, why don't you, if you could?
Okay, sure.
Well, there it is. It'd work a lot better if I looked in the right email or the right text. There it is. Here, I
Found
can
it.
do it. I can do it this way.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see. Can you see that, Mary? Sandy?
Nope.
No,
Well, that's because dumbass has not put it in front of you yet.
Oh.
There. Can you see that?
Yes.
Now that's
yeah.
a sunrise, I guess.
Yeah, I
And we could definitely do that as an acrylic.
That's at Put-in Bay.
Oh, okay. Anybody up for that?
I can do that. Fine.
uh-huh.
I
Get
like
you
it.
back into acrylic, Sandy. Whether you like it or not. All right, well, let's plan on that one. Again, as an 8x10, I'll resize it, redo it to where it fits in an 8x10. And then I'll have to paint it in acrylics. But I
Or you
will
could
do
have
it ahead
Jackie
of
paint
time.
You could have Jackie paint it. Say, here, paint this for me.
Yeah, I could do that. She's the acrylic queen. And I am going to use, I will have, and I will send you in the email about it, just about the whole thing, and maybe a little bit other stuff earlier in the week, just in case it matters to you, of the different mediums to be playing with that. I've done, in trying to become a better instructor, including using acrylics, I've done some research on different materials to use with acrylics for some of the things with drying, to extend the drying, change the gloss a little bit. Mostly it's drying time and being able to use them a little bit more like oils. So I'll try to get you some stuff with that, and in case it matters to you.
Golden has a new line of acrylics out called open acrylics, and they dry a little slower. Not
Yes,
a lot, but a little.
That's very true. And Golden is the origin of acrylics. Charles Golden is where acrylics really came from in upstate New York. He worked for a paint company in New York City, and they actually were brought a big tub of acrylic epoxy back in about 1950. And they made up a bunch of colors for it. And they were the paint store for all the famous artists of the time, Jackson Pollock, de Kooning, a bunch of the others in New York at the time. And so they made up a bunch of colors with it. And they all came there to buy their stuff from him.
Huh.
But Charles, it wasn't his company, and he retired and went back to his farm in upstate New York and with his family, his wife and kids. And he started making acrylics in his garage for the local artists because everybody wanted him to, and it kept getting bigger and bigger, and he got more and more demand. So I ended up starting a company, and that's still there today.
Wow.
The Golden Company is really the originators, because what he did when he finally got a decent line of acrylics, he went back to New York City and wandered the streets more or less with his bunches of acrylics, going around to artist studios all over to get them to use them. And that's how
Oh.
he first developed his business. But then he took it to he actually was he's a chemist. That was his background. He was a chemist for the original company. But he retired, and then he ran that with his family and in the barn. And then they had to put additions on the barn, and it kept getting bigger and bigger. And they put up some new buildings, and the whole company is still operated right off of that property.
Oh,
That's why I like buying my acrylics from Golden. They're a little bit more, but they are good. They're a little bit more expensive sometimes, but they've got more, like you say, they're doing more research all the time. Charles died, and his family, his kids and everybody else have taken it over, and they've got a big research lab there and everything else. So it's
Yeah,
it's a great company.
yeah, they're the only ones making that new blue that I talked to you about.
Yes, that's right. I forgot about that one.
I ordered some. It's been delivered to Ohio, but I haven't played with it yet. I got one tube of acrylic and one tube of watercolor. So I'll see
Okay,
if
I'll be
it's really
curious.
different.
Curious to see
Yeah.
what you think of that when you get back.
Yeah. Hey, can we see, mine doesn't look very good because it's oils. Would Barry or Sarah be willing to show theirs?
Let me
the
see yours
soft
first
pastel?
there. You know, throw yourself in front of the fire there. And
Are you talking about me?
yes, I am, dear.
Okay.
just
It's
wanna
not
see
very, I
yours.
don't like it. I don't like it very well in the oil pastels, so I'm gonna redo it in the soft.
Okay, but it's still, I like your use of color. You've still got a lot of, that's definitely springtime. And you got, more detail in there because of the oils.
Uh-huh.
How about you, Barry?
Well, here goes. Can you see that one?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Barry, that's beautiful.
I
I
like
like
this,
it.
Barry. I really do. It's,
My trees still are a little bright, John, at the top, but
well, nothing
I
wrong
like
with
that.
that. It's you're just happened to be done at noon instead of somewhere in the early afternoon.
I know I need to tone them down a little, John.
Let's see what we got there. Sandy, show me what kind of trouble you've caused.
Not very good.
Oh, that looks nice too.
Oh, my.
Very
Right.
nice. I really like your, that woods looks more like, like the river and the trees. I don't know, it just looks more woods-like. And it's
Yes, it does.
definitely got your hand to it. I mean, it's
Uh-huh.
interesting. There's 3 people have held stuff up, and each one of them, you kind of, okay, I can tell you who they are, I can see the, and that's one of the things that's fun for me, to where I can get to where you could, everybody could send me their picture, and I hope you do, send it to me. Even if I didn't see your name, I'd be able to go, oh, that's a Sandy.
Yeah, I
and,
like it.
all good. Okay,
Thank
folks,
Thank
you
you,
next
John.
Thank you.
see ya soon. Everybody stay safe.
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.